In this problem, we need to find all solutions in the interval 0 to 2 pi, that means we're in radians, of the sine of 2x equals negative a half. There are two different ways of solving this problem. I'm going to show you both, and it's up to you to decide which one you like the most. And both of them are going to use the unit circle. And what we have to do is look on the unit circle to find angles whose sine value is equal to negative 1/2. That means I'm looking for the y value of negative 1/2. Well, if we look on the unit circle, I think you can see here's one, negative a half, and here's the other, negative a half for the y value. So here are my angles that give me that. So I know that 2x equals 7 pi over 6, or 2x equals 11 pi over 6. Now in method 1, the way I'm going to solve it is I'm going to find all possible solutions first. And to find all solutions, you take the function you're given, the sine function. Its period is 2 pi. So you add 2 pi n. That gives me every single coterminal angle with this angle right here. And remember, n is an element of the integers. So n can be any integer you want. So that is what 2x equals. So now to find x, all we have to do is divide each part by 2. And remember, when you divide a fraction by 2, turn the 2 into 2 over 1. So we're going to get x equals a fraction divided by a fraction. Take the fraction in the numerator and multiply it by the reciprocal of the denominator. So it's 7 pi over 6 times 1/2 plus pi n. So I know x equals 7 pi over 12 plus pi n. Because remember, when you multiply fractions, 7 pi times 1 is 7 pi, 6 times 2 is 12. So now we know what x is. All you have to do is put in different values for n. If I put in n equals 0, hopefully you can see you're going to get x is just 7 pi over 12. There's my first solution, because this part goes away. When I put in n equals 1, I get x is 7 pi over 12 plus pi times n, which is 1. And now, since I'm adding a whole number and fraction, I'm going to turn the second one into 12ths by multiplying by 12 over 12. So I'm going to get x equals 7 pi over 12 plus 12 pi over 12, which is 19 pi over 12. That's my next solution. I'm not going to put in n equals 2, because if n is 2, I'm going to add 2 pi to 7 pi over 12, and I'll be more than one complete revolution. So I can stop at putting in n equals 1. Now all we have to do is the exact same procedure for 2x equals 11 pi over 6. We're going to add 2 pi n to it. We're going to divide all parts by 2, just like we did above. And so I'm going to get x is 11 pi over 12 plus pi n. And then when I put in n equals 0, I'm going to get x is 11 pi over 12. Because when n is 0, this goes away and I just get left with that. When I put in n equals 1, I get x is 11 pi over 12 plus pi times 1, which I'm going to turn in a fraction by multiplying it by 12 over 12. So hopefully you can see that I'm going to get 11 pi plus 12 pi over 12. So I'm going to get 23 pi over 12. So there are my last two solutions. So how many solutions do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. The one thing I want to point out if you use this method is the point at which you add 2 pi n is before you divide by the 2. So you find all coterminal angles first before you isolate your x term. Now I'm going to solve the same problem doing it a slightly different way. And this method, we start off with, we know the value of x that we want to find has to lie between 0 and 2 pi, because that's what we're stated with in the problem. But since I want to find 2x, what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply each part of that inequality by 2. So I'm going to get that 2x has to lie between 0 and 4 pi. So that's the first part that I have to do with method 2. So now what I do is I look on the unit circle to find all points on the unit circle whose y value is -1/2, and we already did that when we used method 1. So using the first solution, I get 2x is 7 pi over 6. And now I want to find the next coterminal angle, because that angle just rotated round to there. If I want one more complete revolution to get me that angle, what I would have to do is I'd have to say 2x is 7 pi over 6 plus 2 pi. So I'm going to add my 2 pi. How do you add fractions? You need a common denominator. So I get 2x is 7 pi plus 12 pi all over 6, which is 19 pi over 6. So these are the only two solutions for 2x that I get in this interval that come from this angle here. Now I need to repeat it for this angle here. So for the second one, I get 2x equals 11 pi over 6. And then its coterminal angle is going to be 11 pi over 6 plus 2 pi, which is 12 pi over 6. So that's going to give me 23 pi over 6. So now what we have is we know that 2x can equal 7 pi over 6, 19 pi over 6, 11 pi over 6, and 23 pi over 6. That are all the solutions that I want for 2x, and now all I have to do is divide both sides by 2. So I'm going to divide this side by 2, but my right-hand side, every single answer is going to be a whole lot easier if I just multiply each of them by a half. So I'm going to multiply each of these answers here by a half. And what's that going to do? Well, 7 pi times 1 is 7 pi over 6 times 2 is 12. So all that multiplying each of these answers by a half is just going to turn each of these denominators into 12. So I get x equals 7 pi over 12, 19 pi over 12, 11 pi over 12, and 23 pi over 12. So those are the answers using method 2.